Hello, people of the future. I greet you from the strange and distant past of 2013.
Again.
Yes.
Again.
Many of our customs will be quite strange to you. I had more to go with. I didn't have time for the first one. I want to get it down.
Alright guys, so we're back with Tristan and Alan, and just before the break, we had posed the question that with so many different designers, literally being clients and customers being designers too, what do you feel like are the inherent risks here? Do you feel like players who become popular designers with the populace could actually turn that around sort of against you and kind of use that against you as though they are owed something? Do you feel like you're liable in that case?
Well, so if you're creating popular models on our service, we're going to offer you a job. And we do think people who create popular models are owed something. That's why we give players who commission original content a cut of all the sales that content generates. But the bottom line is our service is all about customization. There is no correct way to use our models. You're free to combine, to recombine, to tweak, to customize, to turn them into your own creation. And all of our designers know that. We are not the guardians of good taste. There is no wrong way to use our models.
So speaking of designers, why don't we talk a little bit about the playtesting experience? Because being that this is a company literally that you guys created from the ground up, you guys didn't derive this mechanic from another system. This isn't like a Half-Life variation or something. This is like you guys created your own content, created your own game, created your own system. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the playtesting mechanic and how you derived the system, and maybe even a little bit about what players can expect, like what they can compare this to, or you don't have to go into the details, but just how's the game play?
Well, let's see. The game...
Why don't I field the games on you field playtesting, because
Gotcha.
he does our playtesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you are an RPG player, I'd suggest looking at Hero or GURPS or any other point-based character generation system as sort of what the game is about in general. In Proxy War, the tabletop game rather, you can really create anything. The reason we have a tabletop game at all is we realized that there were models players could print that there is no game you can play with. If I want to print my own fully custom space pirate faction, we can print beautiful starships, beautiful miniatures, tanks, everything, but there's no game that will accept them. So when we designed Proxy War, the tabletop game, our goal was to make a tabletop board game where you could generate stats for any unit at all and then have them engage in a meaningful struggle. So the core of the system is that you can create new and interesting special abilities by combining building blocks, which are in the rules, to create new combos. So for instance, one of the building blocks in our set is summon, which straightforwardly says you summon one or more units with the following stats onto the battlefield. One of the restrictions you can put onto that is a requirement that there be certain units at hand. So one power we've created that we are demoing with right now is Fuse Flesh, which says target an area that contains a certain number of corpses, friendly or hostile. Those corpses are removed from the field and instead put this undead abomination unit into the center of the space, whose stats are based on the number of corpses in the area of effect. And the way we were able to build that and have it be balanced is we said this is a summon power. You summon the undead abomination. With the limitation, undead abomination is less powerful if there are not enough corpses in the area for it to fully manifest. And by combining building blocks like that, you can create armies with any special ability, any combination of sets of powers, put them into play, and field them in a quick tactical war game. It functions at anything from skirmish scale to epic scale, hundreds of armies. The way we've done that is when you have hordes of identical models, they can be treated as one unit in play. It's called a horde unit, thus allowing you to field a 5-man adventuring party as your army, or the 500 zombies who are closing in around them as your army for a quick and easy tactical war game.
Okay. So players can basically generate, in theory, just about anything they want.
Yes,
Absolutely.
That's the idea. Needless to say, this is a system that's required a lot of clever mechanical underpinnings,
Yes.
Which I can talk about in more detail. It's also required a lot of playtesting, which is more Alan's department.
Well, I think I should talk about the mechanical underpinnings first. Because we were building a game where the goal was anything and everything you could imagine we would represent, we had to sit down for days at a time and do nothing but say, okay, take it down to the barest, most fundamental axiom. What is this aspect of the game trying to accomplish? How does it interact with every other aspect of the game? And how then do we move forward to create that overall framework. So we sat down for days, locked ourselves in a room with our vague ideas of our design goals after a revision of the rules. We came up with, okay, let's come up with this base set of rules, and let's come up with these advantages and disadvantages and building blocks and recombine them and see how we can balance that. And it was good. It was a great system. It played well. It play tested very well. But in the end, it wasn't actually what we wanted. It didn't scale up properly. It didn't act like we wanted our game to act. So we sat down and we learned from those playtesting experiences, both on the table itself and behind the sort of DM screen, looking at analyzing how long it takes to do things, what things have certain incentives in terms of players' eyes. For example, we initially had a certain point at which a unit was perfectly defensible to normal fire. It was defense 6. So at 6 up, or 6 down actually in our role system, you automatically defended any defense check unless someone modified your defense beforehand, which would be weapons like armor-piercing things. Even though we priced it well enough that it was generally out of reach until you got past a certain point value for your army to generally have defense 6, every player raced when they had the opportunity to make their own units to get defense 6 because they thought, okay, I can perfectly defend anything and everything that isn't armor piercing. So this must be the winning strategy. When you pair that with a few sniper units that can specifically target anyone on the field who has armor penetrating so as to make that unit perfectly defensible, that seems like it is the winning combo, but it's not because it's expensive to do. It is priced exactly according to its utility. Still, everyone still raced for it, and when they lost, they were upset they couldn't see why they lost. So, to that end, we took things like the emergent properties of those playtesting sessions, and we looked at how we create both a game that mechanically represents the things we want it to represent, and also gives the right feel, creates the right culture, has exactly everything we want in the game, period.
Little things like higher numbers are always better. That didn't used to be the case. It used to be that lower numbers could be better in some cases. So we've had to simplify this. So on the stat line now, higher numbers are always better in a given stat. Other things like on rolling a die, higher is always better. You have to be consistent in how the things are set up so that the game is quick and easy. Even if it doesn't change anything mathematically underneath, it doesn't actually change your odds of success or failure. Mm-hmm. Little things like, are you consistent about whether high is good or bad, really influences the way players see and feel the game.
There's a simplicity to it. Like, they want a consistency of, like, high numbers are good, low numbers are good. We want to know at the roll of a die what's up, where's down, that
Absolutely.
Sort of thing.
Exactly.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
We should talk about Zargoth.
Yes, absolutely. But what happens with playtesting is you take all these fundamental axioms, you take all these ideas you're trying to express in the game, and you set very rigorous data points that you look for in play, and you watch like a hawk over and over and over, and you playtest until you think you can't possibly playtest anymore, and then you keep going. For a game where you are supposed to be able to imagine and create anything, you need the most statistically rigorous base core mechanics you've ever seen. And I'm not going to say hyperbolically that we've got the best, period, bar none, ever. But we have playtested it until it polishes. You could eat off of that.
Okay.
I'll give another good example. So one of our early playtesting goals was a turn should be quick. Playing a turn of Proxy War should not take more than a minute or two. And so on the little survey, we would record the entire playtesting session, fill out these tables afterwards. What was the average turn time? What was the shortest turn time? What was the longest turn time? But then later on, we discovered that not all turn time is equal. Time that players spend worrying about if they're doing the right thing is less unpleasant than time they spend looking through the rules, which is much more unpleasant than time they spend rolling dice. So now we have a much more detailed breakdown. Players should spend between this much time and this much time rolling dice on the average. Players should spend between this much time and this much time considering their move on the average. Players should never need to reference the rulebook more than this many times per game. that sort of thing.
So this was part of the playtesting experience.
Yes.
This is not like I'm going to open the rule book and be like players should.
No, this is all about our design goals
Sure.
for the game. It's all about making a game that fits everyone. Not necessarily fits everyone, but is the optimal to fit everyone. It's got to be able to make everybody as close to happy as possible.
Sure, pleasing the most number of people versus...
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
So, for instance, there was one revision where we actually had too little time spent rolling dice, because we thought, well, I can have all of the statistical bits that need to be worked out done with a single roll of 3d6. So we will have players roll 1 3d6 for everything. We got the complaint, when I have, 10 units with machine guns all firing at once, I like the feeling of picking up a giant pile of dice in my hands and rolling it and saying,
I would agree with that. There's a tactile sense
you
to
are
it.
dead.
Yeah.
So that added to it the requirement that, for instance, previously, prior to that, we just had time spent rolling dice is bad because it pads out the turn and slows the game down for large armies. Now we have time spent rolling dice should be roughly proportionate to how important that unit is to the overall army and how powerful it is, with caps at the top and the bottom. If you are playing a 500 zombie army, it should not take you 5 hours to take your turn, even though there's 100 units there. But if you are playing a one-man army, the ultimate hero, there should still be a reasonable amount of die rolling. And we've worked out a system that we think is pretty good in that regard.
Have you tried that scenario where you have just hordes and hordes of minis versus a
Yes.
small squad of elite guys?
And that brings up what he wanted to earlier. We have certain design. We have certain what's the word?
Hypothetical armies.
Yes, hypothetical armies, and these guys are given certain nicknames in our dev code. One of them is Zargoth the Destroyer. Zargoth the Destroyer is our little shorthand for a guy who has every single advantage, special ability, whatever that is relevant. So he's Zargoth the Destroyer, and because he also has troop transport, he is also a party bus on the weekends. What he does is we use that hypothetical guy to test, okay, if we put everything together, how does it behave in terms of this particular build of the system versus that particular build of the system?
So let me give you an example. So one of the other terms we have is Chronopants. Chronopants is our hypothetical commander leadership unit, named because of a rather funny incident during game dev, which I will not discuss on the podcast. No.
All right.
Which is a hypothetical unit with buffs or high leadership or other things that make a squad better. So one thing we might say is, so if we assign Chronopants to a squad with Zargoth, does that break the game? And what we mean by that is when you assign units with high leadership to squads full of small numbers of super elite units, does that break the game? Or another thing we might say is if we assign Chronopants to a horde of goblins, does that break the game?
And
What impact
did
does
it
that
break the game?
No. We have set up a system by which the amount of effort you put into any buff is proportional to the amount of benefit you get out of it. And that is not dependent on whether you've got 10,000 1-point units or one 10,000 point unit. Those both receive the same amount of benefit from a single buff.
Nice. Okay, so where have you actually taken this game out to? So you've play tested it, I know, in the studio.
Mm-hmm.
Have you shopped it at expos? Have you shopped it at game stores? Like where have people had a chance to actually get to try this out?
We've done a bunch of game stores in the North Carolina area, particularly the Research Triangle.
Okay.
And a few in St. Louis. Shoutouts.
Yes. Also shoutouts Event Horizon and Atomic Empire, 2 game stores. If you're ever in the Research Triangle, I highly recommend them. They are both fantastic.
Yeah.
And we also, I think this came up previously, did the Escapist Expo, where we just ran demo games all day long.
Okay.
That was probably actually our biggest public release so far. It wasn't really a play test since we extensively play tested the module, of course, before bringing it to the expo. But that was
sort of an unveiling, I guess.
Yeah, that was our big unveiling. And it went really well. We were really pleased with how things went.
Absolutely. We had people who had never sat down to play an RPG of any kind before. I mean, never held a game controller, never picked up a pen and paper, never put together a squad for a war game, and they were playing it almost as quickly as the people who were 20-year veterans in Games Workshop.
Okay,
stuff.
so quick to pick up, quick to learn, and entirely mutable. I mean,
Yes.
it sounds like a perfect marriage of everything sort of coming together.
Wow, when you put it that way.
All right, well, why don't we take a brief break one more time, guys, and we'll come back in just a minute, and we will ask a few more questions of these guys. And if you're interested, please definitely subscribe to our list, subscribe to the podcast, and we will try to get those questions to them, and maybe they can relay those answers to you guys. So we're going to have a brief break, and we'll be right back.